Hello YouTube, this is Sam Gerrans from Quranic.com. Today is Friday the 27th of August 2021 and we're all still here despite the fear and all of the propaganda and everything. And I'm just going to try to push through some of these surahs between 50 and the end of the Qur'an over the next couple of weeks, God willing. Now, we're up to, as part of this series, I mean, I do talks on various other things as well, but this is sort of a particular playlist, I guess you'd call it. Before we get into that, I just want to explain why I'm interested in these. I'm sort of so close to this subject, I just assume that I've explained it or that it's obvious, and it may not be. So I'm going to just quickly go over why I'm interested in these surahs particularly. I mean, obviously the whole Qur'an is of interest. It really relates to my work on what's called in English the mysterious letters, al-huruf al-muqatta'at in Arabic, was the sort of cut or disjointed letters. And these are the letters which, if you in Surah 2 you have alif lam mim, and Surah 3 alif lam mim, and so on. And I've done extensive work on this. I published a sort of the first pass at this 4 or 5 years ago, I can't remember, but I've updated and upgraded that work significantly in the past few months. I had a very long 7-hour video which goes through all of that, but now this is obviously 7 hours is a long time, but it will take you probably 7 hours to get it. But that work is now downloadable. You can find it on Quranic.com. If you go to either of the books, there are basically 2 books that you can also get for free there. The appendix to both of those books is, you can download it as a separate PDF. It's got 3 articles. One is a detailed analysis of on a pan-textual basis of the questions of Salat and Zakat. The second is the mysterious letters, and the third is to do with jinn. And I understand most people aren't going to read this, of course, but this is designed for people who will read it. And if you are that sort of person, if you care about the details, then you will understand what I'm doing here. So briefly, just in summary, without going into the question of the mysterious letters and all of that, let's see if I can get this camera to work properly. Just a second. Yeah, I'm just going to sort of outline what I'm really doing here. So let's change to that, see if you can see it. Yes, you can. Right. So what you've got is Qaf, which is Surah 50, so Qaf is the the mysterious letter at that surah. At Surah 55, you've got this implied Ra, and you will have to go through the whole of this work to understand why that's the case. And if you're not going to do that, that's fine. But I'm just sort of, that's why I'm interested in it in this section, because you've got Qaf, then you've got Ra, and then you've got Noon, which is an explicit member of this set at 68. So Qaf, Ra, Noon. I don't think we need to be geniuses to see what I'm saying that means. You have this Surah 73, which is itself explains these portions of the Quran, and then you've got the end of the Quran itself. And without going into all of this, I haven't got time, and it wouldn't be fair to try to sort of summarize this subject in 20 seconds. It's not doable. In summary, you've got between Qaf and Ra, you've got one kind of segment. Between Ra and Noon, you've got another segment. Between Noon and Surah 73, you've got this other segment. And between Surah 73 and the end of the Quran, you've got this other segment. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of possible ways of dividing this up. But if you go through, if you say, and you're reading this way, you've got a total of 10 possible contiguous readings. So if you decided to go from Qaf all the way through to the end, that's one. If you go from Qaf to Ra, that's another one. From Qaf, Ra through to Noon, that's another one. From Ra, Noon through to 73, that's another one. Believe me, it's 10. There's 10 possible ways of dividing that up. So I'm interested in this. My view is that this section from Qaf, from Surah 50 through to the end of the Quran, has a very particular application, very particular significance. It's not a point of like absolute doctrine with me or anything like that, but it's as a result of my analysis of the mysterious letters. So that's why I'm doing these sort of expositions of these particular surahs. Excuse me a second. So Firstly. Secondly, I would say that the traditionalists' practice of reciting, first of all, Al-Fatiha, which is absolutely central to my analysis on the mysterious letters. And if you get the feelings, I'm trying to sort of tempt you to read my analysis, you'd be right, because it's absolutely worth getting this. But the traditionalist practice of reading Al-Fatiha followed by some portion toward the end of the Qur'an, because what book do you normally read from the end? If you people who kind of go into the brand Islam, they're sort of inducted into this religion. Very quickly they'll be told, you've got to learn Al-Fatiha, and then portions from the end of the Qur'an. Well, I mean, what other book in the world do you read in this rather sort of strange way? Normally you begin a book at the beginning and then work your way through that book, right? But no, this is the way they'll be kind of trained. And I think that this is a vestigial, it's a remainder, it's a vestigial leftover. It's an unknowing, unconscious reenactment of something which was probably done, was done in the time of the Prophet Muhammad. That this part of the Quran, that the Al-Fatiha and then these later portions have a particular significance. I think that what we're having is basically what they call Salat, but really what they mean, namaz, and there's sort of yes, I'm thinking reenactment, I think is a fair way of putting it, is really just it's a way of repeating without understanding the application of this thing, this process of warning, this process of nightly witness to local communities who would be invited to this, and they would either turn away, or they would stay, or they would submit with the believers. It's a bit like I'm not here to bash the traditionalist, but I do have to kind of critique him because he acts as a gatekeeper against this book. I could say similar things about other religions and so on, but other religions don't claim monopoly rights over this book, so I kind of am stuck with having to say what I think. And I will preface this by saying there are many very decent traditionalist Muslims, just as there are some very decent Catholics and Mormons and what have you. But we're not discussing that particular scripture or their scriptures. I think that there's become a tendency, or it's actually become a cult of repeating without any kind of understanding things from the past, and that this sort of emulation is held to have a high value, when in fact, excuse me, I've got something in my eye. In fact, it seems to me to have very little, and it looks to me like if you gave a monkey the keys to a BMW, this monkey is very excited about the keys and the BMW, and he's right. There is a connection between these two things. He just doesn't know what it is, he can't apply it, and he won't let anybody else have a go, you see. So that's what's happened. With all the respect in the world, the monkey isn't going to be able to drive. He's going to have to do some fundamental kind of advancement before he's going to be able to get any real use out of this BMW. But the BMW, is real. It has a use. It's just the monkey doesn't know what it is. And as I say, you think monkeys look sweet and cuddly, but they're not. They'll rip your head. Well, maybe not rip your head off, but they certainly do you a lot of damage. Monkeys are very strong. And so, unfortunately, but also at the same time, the monkey has preserved the keys and, hasn't let anybody else drive the car. So the car's actually in very good condition. It's just not doing what it's supposed to do. So, if you've got a mind and some sort of, analytical abilities, and you are interested, I would encourage you to go through my work on this, because once you get it, you'll see what this is. It reminds me a little bit, there's a film, The Fifth Element, and in this film, I don't know if you've seen it, I'm not here to sort of promote popular culture, but it's a little bit like this. You have a priesthood, and they've protected the thing, they've protected all these parts of the of this weapon, if you want to call it that way. They just don't understand how it works, how it goes together. And they're not particularly interested in letting anyone else have a go. Okay, so that's the background on why I'm interested in in this section of the Qur'an. And now we're just going to move on to itself. So let's just jump in there and see how we go and see if this thing in my eye actually stops hurting. So, I swear by the day of resurrection, and I swear by the self-reproaching soul. Does man think that we will not assemble his bones? Verily we are able to fashion his fingertips. The truth is, man intends to continue unrestrained. Okay, let's just stop there. From the Quranic point of view, the major dividing line between across all of humanity is really one. It's those who believe in God and the last day and do good works, and those who don't. That's it. And so this principal division, this furqan, this dividing line between one section of humanity and another section of humanity, I don't and I can't pretend to understand why it is that some people are built in the way that they incline towards this. They incline toward, they look at what's created and see a creator, and some people who don't. Why that is, I don't know, and I'm not going to try to answer because I don't understand it. I just do know for myself that I am created in this way, in the same way as I have blue eyes. Why, I don't know. Is it to do with the all holy DNA and so on? I don't know. Now, if an atheist says he doesn't believe in it, I give him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, he knows his own mind and own soul better than I do. If you know the magic eye pictures, those pictures which comprise millions and millions of dots, they just look like millions and millions of dots until you focus in a different way, and then you realize, no, it's the Leaning Tower of Pisa, or it's Marilyn Monroe, whatever it is, and suddenly this sort of 3D image comes out at you. Now, an atheist says to me, well, I only see dots. Well, I agree with him that that's what he sees. I also agree that I see dots too, but I also see the Eiffel Tower or whatever it is. And his lack of ability to see the Eiffel Tower is of no interest to me. I mean, it's an interesting phenomenon, but it doesn't in any way sort of impinge on my ability to see what I can see. But when he tells me he can't see it, okay, that I understand that. But this fundamental difference is where we all kind of, we stand on one side of a line or the other side. And obviously it brings us to the current cult that's being rolled out, because it's actually great in some ways, because it's forcing people to choose and actually declare their hand on one side of a line. Either you sort of believe in and worship the state cult or you don't. We are built this way. I don't know why. And that's just the fundamental division between people. But it affects everything else. G.K. Chesterton, great writer that he was, he said that people say it doesn't matter what you believe. Well, he said that actually it only matters what you believe. And he was absolutely right, because everything else follows on from this. Now, when we're talking about belief, there's belief and belief. There's claim to belief and there's actual belief. And belief, if you want to know what somebody believes, just look at what they do. Words. I have a background, as I've probably mentioned many, many times, in public relations, which I absolutely hated. But what I learnt in that was, I've heard lies told by absolute genius liars, and after a while in that, you just stop. You just zone it out and don't listen to it anymore, because you just listen to what people do. And that's all. And so people's actions will tell you. What they say, doesn't mean anything. But if you actually believe in the last day, if you believe that you actually believe that you're going to, firstly, be resurrected, that this life is not all that there is, and secondly, that you will be paid in full, and so will everyone else on that day, and thirdly, that there is a righteous and all-powerful being, the one who gave you everything, all of these dots, and the Leaning Tower of Pisa, then that has consequences. It affects what you do, the choices that you make. It's as simple as that. Again, I have no insight into why particular men believe one way and particular men believe the other way. But I have seen, leaving aside, religious affiliations and so on, that basically people fall into those two categories. So this begins, I swear by the day of resurrection. Let's make sure it's on the screen. It's got a new setup, yeah. And I swear by the self-reproaching soul. Now, I mean, we've all failed, right? I mean, we all know in ourselves that we somehow fall, in many places, fall short of either the standards that God sets for us or those that we set for ourselves, or both. Does man think that we will not assemble his bones? Well, actually, man does think that he will not assemble his bones most of the time. Most of the time, man, me, you, everyone, we're running around, very much locked into this, what seems, this, as the Qur'an puts it, enjoyment of delusion. But when we come to God, we realize that it is, and when I say, when we come to God in devotion, in prayer, and considering the scriptures that he sent us, it's like reaching an oasis in the deserts, isn't it? And you sort of try to stock up on as much water as you can get to sustain you to the next one. It's in the oasis, it's all clear and obvious. It's in the desert. It becomes a little harder to kind of sustain oneself. But God says in the Quran, "Verily, we are able to fashion His fingertips." Obviously, everyone's fingertips are unique. There are identifying mark. You can identify. Apparently, no two human beings in the world have the same fingerprints. So there's a sort of secondary meaning here. The truth is, man intends to continue unrestrained. I mean, I'm going back to in the oasis, when we're drinking the pure waters of the Qur'an and meditating on God in the night and so on. But yet, at some point, there's some part of you thinks, I can just do this, or I can just do that. The shaitan whispers in your ear, there's no big rush, etc., etc. This is the human condition. Quite often people don't want to talk about it, but that is how it is. And I think that's why fasting is so good, because it really kind of draws you back into the kind of down into the silo of belief, rather than being all your energies being dissipated in this life and all being used up. It all gets kind of frittered away very easily. Time goes so quickly, doesn't it? I mean, you just turn around and I'm 54 and I feel like I was 28. That's 6 months ago. I can remember being 2. So how quickly it goes. And one of the benefits of things like I've mentioned, I've got a whole video on this, I can't remember what it's called, but something to do with obituaries. Yes, the YouTube. You can go and look at, I don't know, Greta Garbo or something when she was this age, or whoever, or a very young David Rockefeller comes to mind. David Rockefeller. You can find footage of David Rockefeller as a very young man on YouTube, and now he's dead. 6 heart transplants didn't save him. And so it seems to me like this is a witness. This is a sign that we take it for granted today, but it used to be that even when photography was in its infancy, that you'd hardly have 2 photographs in your life. Perhaps once when you were born, once when you got married. That was it. Today people have taken 15 photographs of their breakfast and uploaded them to Instagram. But the thing is, we have a different sense of time. You can go back and see people who are either very old today or dead today, and see them moving and talking, on a screen at the press of a button. And it seems to me that this is a form of a sign. Anyway, to continue, he asks, when is the day of resurrection? Then when the sight is dazzled, and the moon is eclipsed, and the sun and moon are joined. The sun and moon are joined. There's absolutely no way that any of this can fit into the kind of NASA cosmology and cosmogony. You find modernizing Muslims trying to sort of shoehorn what the Quran says about the earth, about the sun and the moon, into this kind of Copernican view of things. It just doesn't work. If you're going to keep doing that, if you're going to say, oh, well, this is just a metaphor and so on, at what point do you stop that? The other thing, of course, is that, firstly, the Qur'an was attacked over centuries, during the so-called Enlightenment, because it presents, as do the Christian scriptures, the Jewish scriptures, or Hebrew scriptures, they present the circle of the earth. If you read Job, talks about almost like a seal. If you look, when you put in a seal, like if you put wax down and then you press a seal in, it makes a circle with edges kind of rising up. It's quite clear. It talks about a flat expanse. How is it possible for the sun and the sun and moon are joined? This doesn't work. It absolutely doesn't work. And if you go through, and I have, and other people have done a lot of work on this, and it's ongoing, there's absolutely no way that the Quranic presentation of what we see in the sky in any way comports with what we're told and what we're shown, the kind of the pictures, the iconography, which is what it really is, of modern scientism. They just don't go together. Now, if you're hearing this for the first time, I would recommend going out and it's very hard. When I managed to catch a time when it was possible to get this information. This isn't the main thing that I talk about on this channel, but if you please don't just call me an idiot, but you haven't done any sort of research on this subject. Nobody who has done their research on this subject started off by thinking, you know what, yeah, this sounds like a good thing, I'm going to get into it. No, we all started going, you must be mad, and then really studying it. And if you haven't spent a month or two on it, then please just do yourself the favor of looking into it. The person that I recommend on this subject, although not on all subjects, but certainly on this subject, would be, if you can still find him because they're shadow banning him beyond belief, is Eric Dubay. That's Dubay. On this subject, he's what he's done is he's gone out and basically gone through the research of the 1800s and not dumbed it down, but made it accessible to the iPhone generation. He's done very good work. Of course, there's a lot of disinformation out there on this subject as well. But we're all intelligent people. Just what I did was just decided to approach this subject as an adult. What do I know? So and I, like most people, I gave it an evening. I thought, okay, I'll give it an evening. So after an evening, I think, I think I have to give this a bit more. Anyway, 3 months. I spent 3 months on this. Whether you accept that, you don't accept that, I don't really care. But what is beyond doubt is that the Qur'an presents a sky in which the sun and the moon are going around, when this isn't what they call, a solar system. This is a fixed earth. It says God made the earth a fixed place and spread out. It's a fixed plane with the sun and the moon and the sky rotating above it. That's the Quranic presentation. If you don't like that, fine. But to try to kind of, to try to shoehorn that into compliance with the ever-changing, and it's always changing, dictates of something which calls itself science but isn't really. It's just disingenuous, and actually it makes you look a bit silly, in my view. I mean, you can, if you say, okay, if you accept what science says today, then you have to say that this book is wrong. And in fact, there are people out there saying, the Quran can't be true because this is how it presents the earth, and we know that is not true, so therefore the Quran is not true. Well, at least that's consistent. But this kind of modernizing stance, it just seems to me a bit kind of silly. It's all actually humiliating. I don't do it. The Quran says a lot of things which are not consistent with the modern worldview. A lot of things to do, for example, with women. It's very clear who the leaders of society is supposed to be. This is not a modernizing, feminizing soy book. It's got a very clear worldview. You can take it or you can leave it. But that's just, it says what it says. Anyway, let's continue. And the sun and the moon are joined. Man will say that day, whither to flee? No, indeed, there is no sanctuary. Now, this word kalla, this happens many times through the Qur'an. I'm not going to get into it now, but if you want to know what it means, what it does, go to reader.Quranic.com, which is a utility put together by Said Mirza and his team. It's fantastic. Go to any verse that has this. I translate it throughout. No, indeed. No, comma, indeed. Just search for it. Find a note. It'll give you a link directly to the main note. Read it, and then you'll know what it is. There is no sanctuary. To thy Lord, that day is the destination. Now, this is what we're really talking about. Where are you going at the end of the day? And in the time that we're living in, of course, the worst that can happen to you, the absolute worst that can happen to you, is that you can die. This is how they keep you terrified, isn't it? This feminized, passive-aggressive, very, very nasty society that's been generated. It's all about harm avoidance. The worst that can possibly happen to you is you can die. They want to keep you wrapped up in bubble wrap. And so actually this system's going to love you to death, as Australia is finding out with its new camps and all the rest of it. And they're just beta testing it. They're going to roll it out everywhere, obviously. But death is not the worst thing that can happen to you. And anyway, death is utterly unavoidable. And we will know this if we're grown-ups. But it's one of the reasons why we're kept away from death, isn't it, in the West? It used to be, I don't know if it's still the same, but in the country I live in Russia, under the Pravoslavnaya Sistema, the sort of Orthodox Russian system, when somebody died, or they would be laid out in a coffin, you would kiss the forehead. Now, the lips are the most sensitive part of the body, and to kiss the forehead, the cold forehead, that gives you a connection with death that's, again, a sign, going back to my YouTube kind of digression. This is a sign to you that you're going to die too. It's not just a sign of respecting someone. But we're completely alienated from death in the Western society, and from birth also. These totally natural things have been made into some sort of abhorrence. If you haven't read Brave New World recently, I'd give it a reread. I reread it recently, and I found it quite convicting personally, because of how kind of pampered and powdered we've all become, so made abhorrent of death and so on. I have actually laid somebody out. A good friend of mine's mother was in hospital dying, and he asked me if I would go with him, and I said, sure, of course. So we went to the hospital together, and she was in a coma, and long story short, she died while we were there. And in a Russian hospital, you're supposed to have a relative present when they undress the body, so that they can't be accused of theft. I think that's underlying the reason. And my friend was distraught, and he couldn't do it. So I said, it's okay, I'll do it. So I went into the room, and I was there as they actually, it was his mother, as they took all her clothes off and wrapped her in a sheet and moved her onto a gurney, and I helped with this process. And you see the bookends of life. There isn't any doubt about where we're going, none whatsoever, okay? And no amount of bubble wrap or harm avoidance is going to change that. Death isn't like some sort of accident that happened because you didn't play the game correctly. If only you'd taken this precaution. And this is how they get you thinking. No, death is an unavoidable event to which we are unquestionably going, and we should, as far as we know, the only creatures capable of agency, capable of thinking through something that hasn't happened yet and taking preemptive action on that basis, which is really what I say taqwa is. It's prudent fear. It's prudent in that it's able to see something that hasn't happened yet, and it's a justified anxiety and fear, which leads one to change one's actions. Now, again, going back to, this is turning out to be much longer than I expected, but going back to my comments earlier about this basic division between believers and non-believers. Well, I'm not talking here about religion. I'm talking here about those who believe in God and the last day and who do good works. They have their reward according to the Qur'an. It's not a sectarian book in that way. there are those who see that. They see the Leaning Tower of Pisa, as it were, arising out of the dots. And there are those who don't. There are those who say, no, there are only dots. Well, this is the fundamental division between people. So this is really the difference between someone who is ultimately a materialist, i.e. he worships dots, and somebody who is a believer in God, who worships the one who can create both the dots, and that which emerges is inherent within and transcends throughout the dots. This is the division. And again, going back to our current, the new cults, the new fascism, isn't it really, and economic control and all the rest of it. It's making things much simpler in a way, because you have to choose. And I think a lot of people are choosing, they're actually accessing for the first time, probably ever for many, some kind of inner voice. Who do I trust? And this is in the same ballpark. It's not exactly the same thing, but it's in the same ballpark as religious faith. And we haven't had a war in the West. Well, we have had a war. We had a war all of our lives, especially if you're male. You've been on the receiving end of it all of your life. But it's not a bullets and guns war. It's a propaganda, and it's more like a mustard gas sort of war. But now we're being forced to make some of those difficult choices, and in a way that's good. Isn't it better than just dying of a Pringles overdose? Anyway, I digress. But then most of my talks are digressions. Let's continue. Man will be informed that day of what he sent before and held back. The truth is, man is against his soul an eyewitness. Yeah, the self-reproaching soul is an eyewitness. We see, and we have witnesses. According to the Qur'an, there are witnesses writing down on the left and the right. And when we come to the judgment, the truth will be out. There's no way around that. And of course, this is attached to what my comments about taqwa, about prudent fear. If you know that you're going to have to give account for yourself, that has an effect. Whereas if you think, death is the end, well, as Paul says in the New Testament, well, then you may as well eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Going back to G.K. Chesterton, it matters absolutely what you believe. They'll have you believe that it doesn't matter what you believe. All beliefs are all fine. It's all good. That expression really makes me want to start punching people in the face. It's all good. How about a punch in the face? Would that be good for you too? No, of course not. Everyone has a line. It doesn't matter where, what they say, all of this blah, blah, blah. They have a line. You can believe it. And especially with the so-called tolerant lefty kind of libtard people, this sort of, cancer in the body politic, they have a line too. They're incredibly religious. It's just they don't like you and your religion. That's what they don't accept. So don't let them try to, put it on you that they don't have a doctrine. They absolutely do. And they're both tyrannical and highly indoctrinated. So basically, it's not a matter of not having an indoctrination, not having a worldview. It's a matter of choosing one and having the courage to stand up and, die on that hill if need be. Death not being the worst thing that can happen to any of us and being unavoidable. But, if you go back to things like reading Homer and where a glorious death, There are no real, if you think about it, there are no liberal glorious deaths. They're absolutely terrified of death. I was thinking not so long ago also about liberals that they're all neurotic. Or maybe they're not all neurotic, they're genuinely neurotic. Certainly I associate neurosis with them. And I was wondering whether, I'm talking about, conservative, not in the sort of political voting sense, but about self-reliance and taking responsibility and not imposing your micromanagement on other people. That's what I mean by conservatism, really. So I think if conservatives are neurotic, and I couldn't think of any particularly, except there's Ben Shapiro, I suppose, politically is conservative, and he does seem somewhat neurotic, but then he's Jewish, so perhaps he isn't, perhaps there wasn't much of an escape for him. I just wonder if you can think of any sort of, non-Jewish conservatives who are like highly neurotic. Put them in the comments below. I'd be very interested. I can't think of any, none come to mind. Anyway, to continue. The truth is, man is against his soul an eyewitness, and were he to offer his excuses, and here we have what's called an ellipsis. It's a silicet. An ellipsis is something which is implied but not said, and there are many of these in the Qur'an. All translators agree that they exist. Not all translators agree precisely where they are found, but the Qur'an in its presentation, in its style, is very terse. And it allows you to engage with it. And in my view, and in the view of other translators and commentators and so on, here there is an implied statement. So, and were he to offer his excuses, ... as it were, they would not be accepted from him. That's implied. Now we have what I regard as a parenthetical statement. And in fact, if you look at the Quran and see that there are these parenthetical statements, so many of the problems of interpolation which the traditionalist comes across, because he just doesn't realize that there are parenthetical statements. And if you know anything about how Arabic is written, Arabic doesn't really use brackets and so on. I mean, English didn't use it for a long time. If you read things like ancient coin in Greek, which I don't, but I happen to know, there were no spaces between letters. It would just be one stream of letters with no punctuation or anything. You just had to kind of work out from the context what was going on. It's the same here. And in my view, there are many places in the Quran where it sort of turns to one side, it says something, then it turns back. And this is solved wonderfully in English by the use of parenthesis, of brackets. So to continue. Verse 16. Move thou not thy tongue with it to hasten it. Upon us is its gathering and its recitation. And when we recite it, follow thou the recitation thereof. Then upon us is its clarification. So that's verse 19. Now, I have a comment here which I'm just going to read. At 16 through 19, the traditionalist, as is so often the case, has some stories he prefers to the Qur'an and around which he has constructed a mythology, which now forms a lens through which he construes the verses themselves. But if we are to deal with the words on the page, the sense surely is, at 75:16, move thou not thy tongue with it to hasten it, it being the day of judgment or day of resurrection, which has been the dominant subject of the chapter to this point. That is, do not claim it to be coming sooner than thou knowest, or speak before thou knowest. I think that's the main thing I want to touch on there. The traditionalist ascribes to Muhammad a whole range of knowledge that the Quran denies him. He in his presentation, he's somewhat like Yoda. I mean, there's nothing that he doesn't know, and there's nothing he can't pronounce upon. There's nothing that he hasn't got some sort of secret knowledge on, and that would be fine, except that the Quran doesn't treat him in that way at all. And so really we're dealing with different kind of narratives. And as someone coming into this from the outside, reading the book as a book, I wasn't sort of primed in this way, and so perhaps it was easier for me to see that these are not only are they not the same narrative, they're actually conflicting narratives. So when you say to a Sunni Muslim that you don't accept the hadith, you don't believe it, he doesn't hear that. That's not what he hears. He doesn't think to himself, this is somebody who's made a rational decision on accepting the Quran, which says that it's from God, written down, preserved on pure sheets, written by scribes at the time. But he doesn't hear that. What he hears is that you accept that, but you don't accept hearsay written down hundreds of years later by actually people who had been defeated by the Arabs, and you have very good reasons not to accept that. He hears, you don't you don't respect the Prophet. That's what he hears. But that isn't what I'm saying. Because for me, respect of the Prophet is, well, it's really evinced by respecting what he brought us, what we know, what all sects of this narrative cultural narrative called Islam, they all accept the Qur'an, right? This is the one thing that everybody agrees upon. In fact, this is the only thing pretty much that everyone agrees upon. Well, I agree with this, but that's not good enough. But the Qur'an answers those questions too. Anyway, I'm going to try and push on a bit because this is turning into a bit of a ramble. Okay, let's move down. Verse 20, no, indeed, the truth is you love this fleeting life and leave the hereafter. That's an unqualified statement, isn't it? Doesn't say except so-and-so and so-and-so. We do, don't we? It is true. And this is why we need to come to the scripture. We need to fast. We need to do these other things. It's in order to equip ourselves with the technology of faith, of being prepared for that day, because otherwise we're just too selfish and too lazy. And that's another reason why hardship is good for us, because it jolts you out of your complacency. Verse 22, faces that day will be radiant, looking upon their Lord, and faces that day will be scowling, thinking that a crushing calamity is upon them. Now, again, I see this as a parenthetical statement. Now we're going to go into another no indeed, kalla statement. And again, if you want to find out what that is, go to reader.Quranic.com, look up a verse with no indeed in it, look at the notes, and you'll be able to get very quickly to the information that you're looking for. 26. No, indeed, when it reaches the collarbone and it is said, who is a healer? Now, by it means it's a feminine object in singular, and it's referring to the soul. And who is a healer? The actual Arabic says who is the enchanter, but what it's really talking about in the context is a doctor. Who's going to save you? Who is it who's going to provide the harm avoidance in this particular scenario? No one. And he thinks that it is the departing, and leg is wound about leg. Now, this is this. Or shin is round about shin. There are a number of understandings of this particular expression. In my view, it really it shows that kind of tension, that wound, contorted body writhing against something that it doesn't want to, or is trying to avoid. But there are other views on this. To continue. To thy Lord that day will be the driving. Now, obviously, driving is a different connotation for us today. It's just pressing a pedal. But this word and its cognates, or its other words formed around the same root, occur in other places in the Qur'an. And we find also on the day with him a witness and a driver. A driver is somebody who has a whip and is going to make sure that whatever it's driving is going to get to the destination. The import is that there's no way out of this. Okay? To thy Lord that day will be the driving. For he neither gave credence nor performed the duty, but denied and turned away, then went to his household in arrogance. Now, the duty, this is the root from which we get the word Salat. In this case, it's a verb. It's a form 2 verb. If you want to know why I translate consistently across the Qur'an this word in this way, then you can find out quite easily. If you go to Quranic.com, go to either of the books, the pages which have got the PDFs for the books, and just download the article section. And article 1 is on this subject. And in it, I demonstrate on a grammatical. I don't think it can be gainsaid really. What I'm doing there, that this is an abstract noun. It can only be an abstract noun in the same way as sabr is an abstract noun. وَاسْتَعِنُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ. Here we've got sabr. Actually, as-sabr and as-salat, both the objects of the same verb, then they have to be of the same type, the same textual stuff. And the problem is that what the traditionalist has done is he's overspecified the general. Now, if anyone can explain to me the only way in which to have patience, then I'll be more interested. وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ, it means, and make use of وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ, of patience and salat. So what the traditionalist says is, well, how do you pray? How do you pray? So how do you cut the grass? How do you paint the bathroom? How do you do any kind of any number of things? But what he's saying is that this salat is this one specific thing, all the details of pursuant to which he has in this other thing. And this is one of the main reasons how he kind of shoehorns his religion into the mind of the unwary and the gullible. And that's what's happened. And you can prove from the Qur'an that there's no way, just simply impossible, that salat is of this type. It is of the type, the textual type of patience. Patience depends on context. I mean, we know, or honor, or love, or these sorts of things. It's a much broader thing. It's a thing which depends on the context. Now, as the traditionalists will readily admit that patience is, I've never heard a traditionalist say to me, well, how do you have patience? This is one way of having it. It's never happened to me. I don't know if it's happened to you, please tell me, but it's never happened to me. But with this one word, he needs it. You see, he needs it to mean something very, very specific. But that meaning isn't consistent. He doesn't apply this meaning consistently through the Qur'an. There are cases where he has to try to make it mean something else because the context doesn't allow him to maintain this value without exposing the ludicrousness of his assertions. Anyway, if you're interested in why this is the case, and you can concentrate for more than 5 minutes at a time, which clearly you can, because otherwise you wouldn't have listened to this point, then download it, go through it, and consider it. And I invite you to do that, and it's free. Okay, let's just move forward. Verse 34: nearer to thee and nearer, then nearer to thee and nearer. It says another verse, oh man, whither are you going? Where do you think you're going? Every step, every breath, nearer to thee and nearer. This is the reality. This is the reality. The reality isn't what they're making you fearful of. There's only one really rational fear, and that's fear of God. That's fear of this day. When we are going to this, there's no escape. There's no VIP lounge the other side of death. We're all going to the zinger. We're all going to go. There's no way out of it. You will not get out of this alive. Okay? Wherein maturity and reason and human sense come into play is by recognizing this and building on that. Now, some people who recognize the dots, they go that way. And they build. Sure, they build. And they build actively on the basis of dots. But those who see the Leaning Tower of Pisa, as it were, or Marilyn Monroe emerging, transcendent through the dots, they plan for something else. Choose and be happy with your choice. 36. Does man think that he is left to no purpose? Was he not a sperm drop from semen emitted? Then he was a clinging thing, and he created and fashioned, and made of it two kinds, the male and the female. And I was thinking about this quite a lot recently, the two kinds. I mean, with the whole evolution, obviously, microevolution is a fact, they can prove it. But with the macroevolution narrative, I never really see them address the fact of male and female. Because clearly there must have been sort of two evolutionary lines. But male and female, I suppose that's one of the reasons why they have to destroy the differences between male and female in the public consciousness of the new cult. But it doesn't seem to me, I mean, I'm not a huge expert on it, but it doesn't seem to me the whole neo-Darwinist ideology doesn't really, it sort of skirts around the issue of the fact that males and females are different, and those differences are retained within each species. Anyway, that's not the main subject here, but the Qur'an regularly cites the fact that everything is created in pairs as one of its proofs, and is something that I've started paying more attention to, especially since the satanic system always tries to overthrow it, tries to invert the God's order. And it's just interesting to me that over the last, in my lifetime, the total subversion of men and their usurpation of their rightful place and duty in their families and in society, and the creation of a lunatic, hysterical, passive-aggressive, very nasty, highly destructive and controlling feminized system, which is both vicious and fundamentally sterile. Over my lifetime, I suppose in some ways made me more alive to the differences between men and women, and to, I hate to use the word because it sounds rather politicized, but celebrating those differences rather than seeing them as some sort of oppression or something. The fact that the Qur'an mentions the differences between men and women and between males and females in general, again, going back to my modernizing Muslims, you can't integrate this with what's going on now. You've got to choose, right? You've got to choose one side of this line or the other side. It goes for what's going on, the shape of the earth, what's going on in the heavens, the relationships between men and women. If you don't like this book, just walk away from it. Just have the courage to do that. But to try to ingratiate what this book says with the modernizing, feminist, life-hating, vicious doctrine of what's being promoted now, I don't know, it just seems to me very pusillanimous. Okay, let's carry on and just finish this up. And he made of it two kinds, the male and the female. Is then he not able to give life to the dead? And that's the point, is it not? Again, I think we've come full circle. Fundamentally, you either believe that God is the one who created all the dots, which comprise you, me, and everything that we see, is capable of giving us life again and holding us all to account, or you don't. And I don't know why people are the way they are. I don't know why some people see it and some people don't. I find debates between atheists and believers, I find them a little bit disturbing and a little bit bemusing. And why would you? It would be like arguing with somebody who's colorblind about the existence of color. Why? It seems a little bit silly and a little bit like they've agreed. They've agreed to have this kind of fake fight in order to entertain the people in the cheap stalls. I don't see the point. And that's just my view on it. Anyway, I think that's everything I've got to say about this particular surah. I'm going to try to get back to a kind of regimen of making videos so that I can keep my commitments. After finishing the God Protocol and all this other work, I'll be honest, I was exhausted, and I've got a lot of other stuff going on. I'm trying to take care of my family as much as I can, and to formulate a new strategy post God Protocol in the current environment, and to see what I'm going to kind of do next. In the light of all of that, if what I've just said there doesn't mean anything to you and you are interested in finding out, then I would recommend looking at I've got a recent video called My Working Summary or something. If I remember, I'll put a link down below. And in about, I can't remember how long it is, maybe 30, 40 minutes. They're always much longer than I think they're going to be. You'll know who I am, what my work is, and what I'm talking about there. But that's it for today. I hope everyone is well. I would encourage people to not to take what's going on and see it as the worst thing that can possibly happen. It's not. Nobody promised us an easy life. Do they think they're going to enter the garden before we've been tested in our lives and in our goods and so on? We are living in days which give us the opportunity to invest in the future. And the way I see it, the good deeds and the faith that we have now, the opportunity to pick it up so cheap. This is the Bitcoin of eternity. So, just get as much as you can, and, meet that day, with the best account. And we're all human. We all have bad days, you, me, everyone else. But if you make a regular stops at the oasis and kind of get your system used to filling up on pure water as opposed to the filth that comes out of this satanic system, God willing, you'll have enough to sustain you and get to the last day in the best possible condition. And that is the great task, the great reward, and that's what's worth having. Anyway, that's it for today. I wish everyone all the very best. And as I say, I will try to drop another video quite soon. Bye for now. If you're listening on YouTube, you can download my full translation of the Qur'an and all other work free using the button in the top right-hand corner, or buy the hard copy there at 10% less than on Amazon. You can download the audio from my YouTube videos to your mobile device using the links in the drop-down below. I recommend meetquranites.com to connect with other Qur'an-alone believers. Like if you like, comment if you have something constructive to say, and subscribe to get more each week. And use the link in the drop-down below to donate if you would like to help me keep doing this. And remember, this life is short. Eternity is long. If you want good trees, plant good seeds.